I still remember that evening at the community pool like it was yesterday. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the water's surface. The heat of the day had finally broken, giving way to that perfect summer evening temperature where the air feels like silk against your skin. I'd been coming to this pool for about 3 months since moving to the neighborhood, usually just to swim laps and clear my head after work. It was a modest community pool, nothing fancy, just a standard rectangle with lane dividers that were rarely used, surrounded by a concrete deck with a few plastic loungers scattered around. What made it special was the privacy it offered, tucked away behind tall hedges with strings of lights that would come on as darkness fell. That particular evening, there were only a handful of people there when I arrived. A family with 2 young children splashing in the shallow end, an older couple doing slow, methodical laps side by side, and him, Jake. I'd noticed him a few times before, always with a group of friends, always the center of attention with his loud laugh and animated gestures. He had this effortless confidence that I both envied and was drawn to. This was the first time I'd seen him alone. I'm Ethan, by the way, 28, relatively new to town, and perpetually caught in that awkward space between wanting to meet new people and being terrified of actually doing it. I'd moved here for a job in architectural design, leaving behind a small hometown where I'd never quite fit in. Here, I was hoping to start fresh, maybe even finally embrace parts of myself I'd kept hidden for too long. Jake was in the deep end when I arrived, floating on his back with his eyes closed. I slipped into the water at the opposite end, trying not to disturb him. The water felt incredible after a long day hunched over my drafting table. I began my usual routine of laps, but I couldn't help stealing glances at him every time I came up for air. He must have felt my eyes on him, because suddenly he was swimming toward me with powerful, confident strokes. "Race you to the other side?" he called out, a challenging grin spreading across his face. Before I could even respond, he was already cutting through the water beside me. What else could I do but accept? We reached the wall almost simultaneously, both of us breathing hard and laughing. "I'm Jake," he said, extending a hand while treading water. His eyes were the exact color of the pool, that impossible blue that seems to change depth depending on how the light hits it. "Ethan," I replied, taking his hand briefly. "I've seen you here before." "Yeah? I've noticed you too." The serious lap swimmer, always in your own world. There was something in the way he said it, not mocking, but intrigued, like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. As we talked, I noticed the family gathering their things. The mother wrapped her shivering children in bright towels while the father collected their scattered toys. The older couple had already left without me noticing. The lifeguard, a college student who always seemed more interested in her phone than the pool, announced she was closing in 30 minutes. "Looks like we're about to have the place to ourselves," Jake observed, watching as the family made their way to the gate. There was something in his voice, a hint of suggestion, perhaps, that made my heart beat a little faster. The family left, and then it was just us and the lifeguard. Jake suggested a game of water basketball, swimming over to retrieve the weathered ball from the pool's edge. We played for what felt like minutes, but must have been longer, laughing and trash-talking like old friends. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so carefree, so present in a moment. "Closing time, guys," the lifeguard called out eventually, already packing up her things. "Just pull the gate closed when you leave. It locks automatically." Jake looked at me with a mischievous glint in his eye. "What do you think? Should we stay a bit longer?" I hesitated. "Won't we get in trouble?" He shrugged. "The gate locks from the outside. No one can get in, but we can always get out. Besides, it's such a perfect night. Seems a shame to waste it." The lifeguard left, clearly not concerned about whether we followed immediately. Jake swam to the edge of the pool and hoisted himself out in one smooth motion. Water cascaded down his body as he walked toward the gate. I watched, transfixed, as he closed it firmly behind the departing lifeguard, then turned back to me with a smile that made my stomach flip. "Now it's just us," he said, diving back into the water with barely a splash. No interruptions. The atmosphere shifted subtly. The pool was now our private world, illuminated by the underwater lights that had automatically switched on as darkness fell. The surrounding garden lights created a soft glow around the perimeter, just enough to see by, but dim enough to feel intimate. "So, Ethan the architect," Jake said, floating closer to me. "What's your story? What brought you to our little corner of nowhere?" I found myself opening up to him in a way I rarely did with new people. I told him about growing up in a small conservative town, about feeling like I was always wearing a mask, about how architecture became my escape, creating spaces where people could feel truly at home when I never quite did. I get that, he said softly. The mask thing. I wore one for a long time, too. Jake's story unfolded between splashes and quiet moments floating side by side. He'd grown up here, left for college with big dreams of becoming a marine biologist, then returned when his father got sick. Now he taught science at the local high school, trying to inspire kids to see the wonder in the world around them. Sometimes I think about leaving again, he admitted. But then I have moments like this. Perfect summer nights, unexpected connections, and I think maybe everything I need is already here. The way he looked at me when he said it made me wonder if I was included in that everything. As we talked, we gradually moved closer to each other, until we were both standing in chest-deep water near the pool's edge. I became acutely aware of every detail. The water droplets clinging to his eyelashes, the way his shoulders rose and fell with each breath, how the pool lights illuminated him from below. Can I tell you something? Jake asked, his voice lower now. I've noticed you more than just around. I've actually been hoping to run into you alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why is that? I managed to ask, though I think I already knew the answer. Because every time I see you, I want to know more. You have this quiet intensity that's fascinating. Like you're carrying these deep thoughts no one gets to hear. Most people don't find overthinking very attractive, I said with a nervous laugh. I'm not most people. He moved closer still, until I could feel the current of the water between us. And I find it very attractive. There was a moment of suspended time where neither of us moved or spoke. Just the gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge and our breathing, slightly out of sync. I felt simultaneously terrified and more alive than I'd ever been. I haven't done this in a while, I whispered, not even sure what this was exactly, but knowing we were on the precipice of something. Done what? Gone swimming after hours. Jake teased gently, but his eyes were serious, understanding. Connected with someone. Really connected. Jake's hand found mine underwater. Me neither. Not like this. The kiss, when it happened, felt both inevitable and shocking. His lips were cool from the water, but warmed quickly against mine. My hands instinctively moved to his shoulders, feeling the strength there, anchoring myself as the world seemed to tilt around us. The water made everything weightless, dreamlike, as we moved together against the gentle resistance it provided. When we finally pulled apart, I felt dizzy, disoriented in the best possible way. Jake's smile was different now, softer, more vulnerable than the confident grin he'd worn earlier. I've been wanting to do that since the first time I saw you doing laps, he admitted. You looked so focused, so in your element. It was beautiful. No one had ever described me that way before. Beautiful. The words settled around me like a warm current. We stayed in the water for what felt like hours, but was probably just one, talking, touching, discovering each other in that magical space between strangers and something more. Jake told me about his coming out in college, how it had been both terrifying and liberating. I shared my own journey, still ongoing, still sometimes uncertain, but suddenly feeling more hopeful than it had in years. Do you know what I thought when I saw you were the only other person left at the pool tonight? Jake asked as we finally began to gather our things, reluctantly acknowledging that we couldn't stay in our private paradise forever. What's that? I thought, this is my chance to not let him disappear again. You always leave so quickly, like you're afraid of taking up space. I wanted to show you that you deserve to take up all the space you need. As we dried off and got dressed, there was none of the awkwardness I would have expected. Instead, there was a comfortable certainty, as if we'd known each other far longer than a few hours. When Jake took my hand as we walked toward the gate, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. So, he said as we stood at the exit, the world beyond waiting to intrude on what we'd created, what happens now? I thought about all the times I'd walked away from possibilities out of fear, all the connections I'd cut short before they could even begin. Not this time. Coffee tomorrow morning? I suggested. I know a place with great pastries and a view of the harbor. Jake's smile was like sunrise breaking over water. It's a date. We pushed through the gate together, letting it click shut behind us. The night air felt different somehow, charged with possibility, alive with promise. As we walked toward the parking lot, our shoulders brushing, I thought about how sometimes the most extraordinary moments come from the simplest decisions, like staying a little longer at a pool on a summer evening, like closing a gate and choosing to remain in a moment rather than rushing on to the next. Jake kissed me goodnight beside my car, a brief touch of lips that held the promise of more to come. "See you tomorrow, Ethan," he said, walking backward toward his own vehicle, as if unwilling to break eye contact until absolutely necessary. "Tomorrow," I echoed, already counting the hours. As I drove home, windows down and the warm summer air rushing past, I couldn't help but smile at how differently my evening had turned out than I'd planned. I'd gone to the pool seeking solitude and exercise, a chance to clear my head. Instead, I'd found connection, possibility, and a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful experiences come when we allow ourselves to be seen. That night at the community pool marked the beginning of something I hadn't even known I was looking for. All because we were the last two guys in the pool, and he closed the gate and came back. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of discovery. Coffee dates that stretched into lunch, walks that lasted until sunset, conversations that flowed from superficial to profound and back again. Jake showed me his favorite spots around town, places I'd never noticed despite living there for months. I shared my sketches and designs with him, ideas I usually kept private until they were perfect. We returned to the pool, of course. It became our place, though we never again had it completely to ourselves. But sometimes, when the evening grew late and the crowd thinned, we'd exchange knowing glances across the water, remembering that first night when everything changed. 3 months after our pool encounter, as we sat on the beach watching waves crash against the shore, Jake turned to me with that same mischievous smile I'd fallen for. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that night at the pool a lot lately." "Oh," I leaned into him, enjoying the solid warmth of his shoulder against mine. "Yeah, I keep thinking about how close I came to not closing that gate, to just saying goodnight and walking away. How different everything would be now." I thought about it too, the parallel life where we'd simply nodded goodbye and gone our separate ways. The life where I might still be swimming alone, still hiding from connections rather than embracing them. "I'm glad you closed the gate," I said simply. Jake's hand found mine in the sand. "Me too. Best decision I ever made." And as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in the same colors as that first evening, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought us to that pool at that moment. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary places, like being the last two guys in a community pool on a summer evening, when one closes the gate and comes back. Total _char_count, 17,512.